Well, thanks very much, Kevin. And first, I want to thank IBF and Life Science Alley for inviting me here to talk a little bit about what's going on in Washington as it impacts the medtech space. Clearly, in the 30 or so minutes we have, I won't be able to cover all the issues. But I think, as you're all well aware, the impact that policy, particularly policy coming out of Washington, has on your ability to invest and innovate has probably never been greater. Really what I want to do is kind of highlight some of the issues that we've been working on. I think some of the progress has been made in some areas, work that still remains. But really, if I can leave you with one message, it is that you all can impact this process. Your voice is very important to the debate in Washington. Your small business, your job creators, you're improving patient care. And so I know at certain times it feels like you're out there alone trying to work on your technologies, but I would implore you that your voice is very important to the discussion. And it needs to be heard. I'll also say at the outset that for the most part, I'm simply the messenger here. I'm not a member of Congress, so please don't hold me, even though I'm from Washington, don't hold me responsible for many of the policies coming out of there. But I will say, because of many of the people in this room, and again, our strong partnership with Life Science Alley, I think you'll see here we have made important steps and improvements and enhancements to trying to shape some of the policies that directly impact our space. So just briefly, I think Kevin did a great job summarizing it. And again, I didn't ask for the plug, but I appreciate that as well, because the more we can build our army, the stronger the voice is. But the group really was founded in 1992, 20 years ago, when there was a similar, as one of the earlier panels discussed, kind of a similar dynamic. There was a slowdown at the FDA. Small companies felt that their voice needed to be amplified in Washington, and they really made a difference there. And fast forward 20 years, we're close to 300 member companies now, and we're really trying to be the eyes and ears for small companies in Washington, providing advocacy and educational assistance. And I think you'll see that there is a track record of success here. And again, many of you who have directly engaged on these issues have seen that throughout the years. So briefly, what I wanted to start to do, and again over the next course of 30 minutes or so, and please, at any point, if you have questions during any of the presentation, raise your hand. We'll also, kind of break it up into 3 parts here, so at each of the parts as well, we'll pause for questions. Starting with what's going on at the FDA, obviously, this is every 5 years we work through the reauthorization of the user fee program, so that negotiation has been a long effort. I saw Susan Alpert earlier. We spent a lot of time together over the course of last year negotiating that agreement with FDA. There's also legislative efforts up on the Hill that I'll talk about, and administrative changes that FDA is pursuing that impact how companies navigate the FDA. We'll also talk a little bit about the healthcare law, the medical device tax, obviously efforts to repeal that, the Physician Sunshine Payment Act, some of the payment reforms that are underway, but I know that the speaker following me, the session following, and then the keynote luncheon speaker, obviously we're focusing a lot on reimbursement, so while we certainly can field those during Q&A, based upon the agenda, I didn't drill too much down, but I have some macro comments there. And then close out talking about the elections, both at the presidential level, the House and the Senate, and what the lay of the land looks like moving forward. So with FDA, clearly when we look at what the focus and the objective is to make it a more reasonable, predictable, and efficient process so that patients have timely access to safe and effective products. And this has been a long, as you all know, one of the frustrating things here is that the law regulating medical devices has not changed over the course of the last 5 years or so, but companies' experiences have changed dramatically and for the worse. And so when we're trying to look at root cause of what drives that behavior, I don't think you can point towards a change in the legal system or the law, but more upon those who are implementing the law. And credit to Josh Mackow and a lot of others. We kind of 2+ years ago went out to try to collect data because we went up to the Hill, provided anecdotes. They said we need more data, so aggregated data. And that was kind of the beginning of the ball rolling and the snowball getting larger and larger to where additional studies were done, even by FDA, and started highlighting some of the common themes here about the lack of predictability, transparency, kind of change in reviewers, moving goalposts. And these are things now, quite frankly, that even FDA is embracing and saying, yes, these things are going on. So I think, the efforts over the last couple of years have forced FDA to realize that there are some things that need to be improved. In addition to this, there have been changes that FDA has taken administratively that are trying to reform the pre-market review process, and we'll talk about some of the pros and cons there. But really, we're at a critical point here because, as I said, when you have this reauthorization of the user fee program, MEDUFMA, it provides an opportunity, a window in time every 5 years to get some legislative reforms in place as well. And so I think, as you'll see here, all the work that's been done by many of you in this room, LSA, MDMA, others, AdvaMed, have really come together during this window in time right now. And I'll just talk briefly about some of the improvements within the user fee package. So bottom line is that the industry did agree to basically pay $595 million in user fees over the course of the next 5 years. That represents about a doubling of the fees from MEDUFMA 2, but they're structured in such a way that, long story short, there are fees for companies that register with the FDA. Under MEDUFMA 2, there were some exemptions from who had to pay that fee. Now everybody has to pay the fee. So bottom line is companies submitting 510Ks, PMAs, PMA supplements, those application fees will only go up about 5% approximately. So there's not going to be a big hit on an individual company perspective, but by broadening the base, we're giving FDA additional resources. In exchange for those additional resources, FDA has made commitments to improve the pre-market review process. And some of the key ones I'll highlight here, and they're not listed in their entirety, but when we started looking at what we needed to have happen here, and Heather Rosecrans is our Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at MDMA, 30-plus year veteran at FDA, and ran the 510K program for nearly 18 years. And she kind of explained it, when the review starts, you have a funnel, and it's wide here, and as you go along the process, the number of issues should narrow. But now currently it's kind of narrows, and it gets larger, so there's no predictability. So what can be done to get rid of some of those surprises along the review process? And one of the key ways we feel is that having a more structured pre-submission process with FDA so that issues are identified at the outset. And right now, when you make commitments are made and you have these meetings, there's no way to memorialize those commitments. So under the MEDUFMA agreement, there'll be meeting minutes that are in place that the industry and FDA will agree to kind of memorialize those agreements. And if FDA wants to deviate them from those commitments down the road, then they'll have to have valid scientific evidence to justify that deviation, and it'll have to have a supervisory oversight. And again, these are some things right now where I think a lot of companies feel that they're held hostage sometimes to the whim of the reviewer. And so the more structure you can put around this process, we think the better off we'll be. Kind of view it as guardrails to the process as the submission goes forward. You also had a situation in the past where if it missed one of the performance goals, it kind of fell in the black hole. Well, you missed your goal, but there's no secondary goal, and so those companies were kind of just out in the ether. Now there's what we're characterizing as a no submission left behind provision, which states that if you miss one of the goals within a very short time period, I think for 510Ks it's 10 days, for PMAs maybe it's 20 days, FDA and the sponsor will sit down, list out all the outstanding issues, and come up with a roadmap to get a final decision. I think these are things that FDA recognizes they need to close these submissions out, move through them quickly. They're also going to have earlier interactions with the companies. They're going to have major, AI letters or initial responses out to the company within 60 days, not on day 89. So they actually give that company 30 days to respond and hopefully get that clearance within a 90-day window. Also important here, and we saw the drug space had this when they entered into their user fee negotiation back in 1992. There was an independent assessment that was done that looked about FDA's needs, their processes, ways to improve it, and we really never had that on the device side. And so as part of this agreement, I think a core element here is that there will be an independent assessment conducted of FDA, their processes, procedures, to see how they can improve the pre-market review process. Industry will be actively involved in that project as well. And importantly here, and this was a healthy discussion during the negotiations, is it's not, in Washington, oftentimes a report is issued and goes into a filing cabinet. Issuing a report is not that substantial. But the way this is structured, within 6 months of the project being initiated, the independent assessor will issue its high-level recommendations, kind of high-priority recommendations. 6 months after that, so a year later, all the recommendations will be listed. FDA then has 1 year to devise its implementation plan about how it will internalize and incorporate these recommendations into their operations moving forward. And the most important piece of this, I think, and one that we hope will provide real accountability here, is that independent assessor will come back a year later and then basically judge and determine how successful or unsuccessful FDA has been in implementing these recommendations. So this is not just a report for the sake of a report. We really do think it's going to help identify additional enhancements